the law of signs because they don't give you enough information. And an example of that would be if they gave you a triangle like this, where you knew this was 12, and you knew this was 15 degrees, and you knew this was 7. That's side angle side, which is a way that you can prove that triangles are congruent from geometry class, but you can't use law of signs there because you don't have a side and an angle that go together. Like you have this angle, but you don't have this side. You have these sides, but you don't have the angles to go with them. So if you set up law of signs, it doesn't work. It doesn't mean you can't solve the triangle. It just means you can't use law of signs. You have to use law of cosines. Law of cosines looks a little scarier than law of signs, which is why people use law of signs at first if they can. Sometimes you'll have a problem that they give you information that you can't use law of cosines and you need to use law of signs. But again, I'm going to give you this. You don't have to memorize it, but it's not so bad to do. It looks a little scary, but there you go. It was good. Tucker had his first soccer game. He was all-star. He made 3 goals. Oh no, they won 5-3, I think. 5-2. Something like that. But they told me that what was this third hour that I was telling them this? I don't know. 1 hour I was telling them, maybe it was third hour. And I told them that he's only 6, and so they don't even have goalies. They just run back and forth. But I mean, there's kids there trying to stop him, but there's not like one specific goalie. And they told me I shouldn't tell people that because he should have made more goals if there wasn't a goalie. So, but he did good. He liked it. Let's pretend that this is a. Maybe we should label this. This is a. Call this B. Let's call this C. I need some Y. This looks scary, but to find one side, it's just that side squared equals the other 2 sides squared added together minus 2 times the other 2 sides times the cosine of the angle that goes with that side, right? So that big A, that A is important. So we're not going to actually work this out because we'll do one in a minute, but you could plug in to solve for A over here because you could say this squared plus this squared minus 2 times this plus this cosine of 15, and you just type it in your calculator is really all you do. This works for any side. Like what if I wanted to solve for B instead of A? If I wanted this to say B squared instead of A squared, how do you think this is going to change over here? If this changes to B squared, is this still going to say B squared? What's it going to say? We're just going to change out A squared with B squared. They're going to switch. So now this is going to be B squared. Oh no, I'm going to show you both at the same time. I'm not ready for that. This is going to now say A squared plus C squared because now I have to square the other 2 sides. So now it says 2AC. And what else changes? Instead of looking at angle A, now we're looking at angle B. I'm going to give you this formula on the test, but I'm not going to write it all 3 times because it's the same formula. It's just changing out the letters. So you just need to, as we do these today, I just want you to think about it's always whatever side you're solving for squared equals the other 2 sides squared minus 2 times the other 2 sides times cosine of the angle that goes with it. Which means if we were going to do C squared, all we're changing is that C squared is changing to B squared now, and now it's cosine of C. It's the same thing over and over again. It's up to you if you want to write it all down. I only write it once. Why did I do 2 screen shades here on this? What else am I hiding from you? Well, what if I wanted to solve for the angle instead of for the side? Again, we could just use this and we could just solve for cosine, right? Like we could plug it in and we could subtract it over and we could divide. It works out. But sometimes it's easier just to do it the other way. If I subtracted these over and then divided by the negative, I think you should get something like this. And again, just thinking about algebra, if you just think about it for a second, you might say, well, how come these are positive and A is negative? If you subtract these over and then divide by -2, you agree that's going to change all the signs? That's why it changes. If you just solve it out using this every time, it works. It's just more steps. And I'm just going to show you it for all of them. It's just changing the letters again Are you going to give us those two? No, this is all I'm giving you. Because it's just algebra from there. That's all I'm giving you. Which means if you think you're not going to be able to remember that or know how to get it, then you just need to use that every time and do the algebra. Yes.
So will the test be split up like how will it be split up?
The test is 2 pages front and back. I just rip it apart. And you just do the first page. Like it's just, there's not a calculator, no calculator part. It's just everything all
So
together.
it's kind of split in like 5, 1, 5, 3.
No, not necessarily. 5, 5, and 5, 6, there's not so much in 5, 5, and 5, 6 that's one day of the test. It is just kind of random. But it should be easy to do the difference. But, like 5, 5, and 5, 6, they're going to be solving triangles, story problems. Everything else is going to be solving trig equations and trig proofs and, all that fun stuff. So let's just do a couple of these. Hopefully it'll go better than the second hour. We had a little disaster in second hour today. I don't know. There was just lots of questions and what about this? And then I said, well, we could do this, and I should have just said one thing. So the good news about you having me second is hopefully cleared up all the confusion. Oh, they're super talkative, and then someone had lots of questions, which was making me think a lot harder, and so then that made them just stop listening altogether, and it was rough, so. But then they always say, look at our grades, obviously we know what we're doing, and then I just want to strangle them, so.
And then give them the hardest test ever and see how many.
I can't give them a different test than...
Actually, no, why don't you just give them a pop quiz over something that they don't know and see how smart they actually are.
Just don't give them any dumb numbers.
They don't give them those.
Just fail them. Give them fail. That's what I would do.
I don't give grades.
They don't deserve them.
They get what they earn. They do, actually. I was putting grades in last night in my grade book, and for second hour, like, just rough people getting their 10 points of the week because they're just bad kids sometimes. And then they just laugh when I get my clipboard out. They're like, I'm actually taking our participation points away. They don't care. They're bad kids.
You gotta put your foot down. They're getting out of control. Put your foot down on their throat.
Side. This is a triangle, but you cannot do law of sines on this because they don't give you an angle. And to use law of sines, you have to know at least one angle. So this is where you have to use law of cosines. So on the test, it won't say use law of sines, use law of cosines. You should be able to look what they give you and know what to use. Does it matter which angle we solve for first? Let's just do A first in the alphabet. So I'm guessing, I don't know, we could do either one. We could use this one, A squared equals B squared plus C squared minus 2BC cosine of A. And we can plug everything in and move it over. That's what I'm going to give you on the test. Or we could use the one across from it. It's the same thing, it's just changing the around. If you solve for cosine of A, that's going to be B squared plus C squared minus A squared over 2BC. Sorry, my brain is trying to remember this again today. I've been messing it up all day. I don't care which one you want to use. If you think that you're going to use this because that's what I'm going to give you on the test, I say that's what we should do in class. If you want to see how nice this is, that you just plug it in, I'm okay with that too. You get the same answer. It's the same formula. It's just solved for differently. So does anybody have a preference? Probably you're going to use this one on the test because I'm going to give it to you and you're not going to have this memorized. So you just want to make sure you solve it correctly. We're going to plug in everything but angle A. That's what we're looking for. So if I plug in A, I get 24 squared equals 16 squared plus 29 squared minus 2 times 16 times 29 times cosine of A. It's a whole lot of calculator work, kind of just like the law of sines. But remember, just some easy things, simple things that you shouldn't be making these mistakes, but every year people do. Do you agree that you cannot just do this whole thing on your calculator at once right now? Because this is stuck with cosine. Do you agree with me? This is all of this times cosine. So don't just type all this on your calculator and subtract it over because it's not, like this is stuck with cosine. So just don't make that mistake. I don't know how much work you want to show here. But 24 squared is 576. 16 squared plus 29 squared is 1097. Minus 2 times 16 times 29 is 928 cosine of A. Every year I have multiple people that do this way because they don't know this formula, this way give them a test, and they take 1097 minus 928 on their calculator, and they get the wrong answer because they just don't pay attention that this is stuck with cosine. You can't do that. You have to subtract 1097 over, and you get negative 521, and that's multiplied, so you have to divide it over, and I can tell you that that's exactly what you get if you use this formula, because what we exactly did is we took a squared minus b squared minus c squared, and we divided by negative 2bc, which is exactly what's on the other side. So I get cosine of A equals, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those negatives, 521 over 928. Then what do we do? Yeah, I'm going to use inverse cosine, and I'm going to get that A equals 55.8 degrees.
Are you going to give us like a certain place to round?
Probably just the nearest tenth. But I always say, yeah, at the end, round to the nearest tenth. Not all the way through if you had a decimal. Trevor, are you snoring back there? You're snoring so much that you're bothering Jake. So, I could do this, right? So here's where the conundrum happened in second hour. Some people said, let's use law of sines now, because that's going to be way easier than doing all that work for law of cosines. And you're right, we could do law of sines now, but here's the problem. If we're going to find B or C, if we're going to find B, that means that we're going to have to use this side and this side and this angle. Yes? That's angle side side. If we're going to do C, that would be this side, and this angle, which is angle side side. It's not that you can't go back to law of sines, but the hard part is sometimes you're going to end up getting this ambiguous case, and you have to figure out which one to use to make this triangle, and I feel like it's a lot more thinking than what's needed. So my advice to you, instead of having the issue that we had in second hour, just do law of cosines again. Even if it's a little bit more work, it makes you not have to think about angle side side and all the options that you have, because with law of cosines, if you do that, there will only be one option. Why? Because what two quadrants is cosine positive in? 1 and 4. Can you have an angle from quadrant 4 in a triangle? Because it's like 270 to 360 degrees, right? So if you do law of cosines, you don't have to worry about the ambiguous case. It'll always give you the one angle that you need. So my advice is, on these problems, even though law of sines seems like the easy way to do it, just do law of cosines again. And then once we find one more angle, do we need to do law of cosines a third time? No, because then we can just subtract from 180. Okay, so to save all that trouble, let's just do law of cosines again. Let's just go in order. I'm going to find B next. And just to save a little time, I'm going to use this formula just to show you that, especially if you have it on there, but then we can go back to this on the next one. But if you want to find B, cosine of B is going to be the other two sides squared, a squared plus c squared minus b squared over 2 times the other side. And you just plug it straight in. It works out so great. And you still have to do inverse cosine. So I guess I should show my work here. 24 squared plus 29 squared minus 16 squared over 2 times 24 times 29. Really annoying is when you plug in the wrong letter in the wrong spot and then you miss it. It annoys me when I do that. Minus 16 squared. On the top there, I get 1,161. 1,392. don't get freaked out if you get a negative number there, because remember that inverse cosine of a negative number just means you're going to be in quadrant 2, which means it's going to be an obtuse angle, so don't freak out too much if that happens. You shouldn't get a negative angle, but you can have a negative value there. I'm just typing that directly in my calculator, inverse cosine, and I get like 33.5. Did you get that? And then in second hour, they want to do inverse cosine again, or inverse sine, or not inverse cosine, law of cosines again, or law of sines, which you could do, but there's no need to. If you know two angles, all you got to do to find the third angle is subtract from 180. That's supposed to be the easy part.
It sounds like second hour tries to make everything harder than what it's supposed to be.
Well, you know. 90.7 degrees, which means they gave us three sides, we found the other three angles using law of cosines. So my advice is just stay away from law of sines when you have to do law of cosines, because otherwise the ambiguous case gets mixed up in there, and it's a disaster.
So we can only use law of cosine so we have all three sides?
No, we're going to do another one. Sometimes they give you angle, side, angle, and you can do it. Those are really the two cases that you use law of cosines. Because the rest of the time they don't give you, if they gave you other information, you wouldn't have enough to use law of cosines, just like sometimes you don't have enough to use law of sines. I know, it seems confusing, right? So we're going to do a worksheet tomorrow with them on the same page, and so I think it'll help you see, like, you'll be able to see when they're mixed up that you'll know which one to use, right, what they give you. If you can use law of sines at first, that's what you want to use. But here's the other case for law of cosines. That kind of looks like a right triangle here, but
Wait, so we're doing a worksheet and review?
review's Wednesday.
I thought we were doing another.
I know. We could spend another day reviewing, but then that puts us having a test Friday and Monday, and I just don't know about that. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Again, why do I have to use law of cosines here? Because they don't give me enough information for law of sines. If they give you enough information for law of sines, then you can start with law of sines. And on the last one, when they give you all three sides, you could have picked any angle to start with. On this one, when they give you angle, side, there's only one thing you can solve for first. What is it? Notice on, here, let's go back for a second. On these problems, if whatever angle they give you, that's the side you can solve for. So if they only give you one angle, then you have to solve for the side that's across from it. And so we could say b squared equals a squared plus c squared minus 2ac cosine of big B. Again, you can plug in any letter there and just replacing the other ones. Some people like to just say, go ahead and say b equals the square root of all that. I don't know why they don't write it like that, but they don't. But I'm just going to plug everything in. It's just 15 squared plus 42 squared minus 2 times 15 times 42 times the cosine of 49 degrees. The great part about this is you can just type that entire thing in your calculator, right? And get b squared equals that. Or if you want to be really fancy, you can go ahead and hit square root of all that, but I'm not going to since I have it up here like this. Plus 42 squared minus 2 times 15 times 42 times cosine of 49. And I got b squared equals 1,162.365623. Hopefully you don't tell me that that's the side of the triangle. That's a pretty big triangle. You take the square root of that. And I got b equals 34.1. Did you get that?
So if we just do it like this, all of that step.
Right, like if you write this and you have your answer, I'm okay with that. Now again, it's very tempting to want to do law of sines here because it seems like it's just so easy, but don't do it because I'm telling you that it just creates problems. Second hour was a disaster today. You want to solve for A or C? C, shouldn't matter which one you pick, but you're going to have to do law of cosines to do it. So, A? Do you want me to do from here? Because this is probably what you're going to do, where you have to solve it out, or you want to do the shortcut? I love the other way also. Since you're the only one that speaks up, we'll go either way. Cosine of A is going to equal the other two sides squared, so that would be B squared plus C squared minus the side that goes with that angle, minus A squared, over 2 times the other two sides. .1 squared plus 42 squared minus 15 squared over 2 times 34.1 times 42. Again, I'm okay if at the same time that you do this, that you want to hit inverse cosine, as long as your parentheses are correct, I'm okay with that. What I tend to do is I do the top and I do the bottom and I write it as a fraction. You could do it all at once, just be careful if you want to do it as a decimal. I'm just going to type it out. 34.1 squared plus 42 squared minus 15 squared is 2701.81 over 2 times 34.1 times 42 is 2864.4. And then I'm going to inverse cosine that. And again, it's a lot of calculator work. I get A to equal 19.4 degrees.
For some reason my calculator is using 700.
Something must have went wrong. Check it all at one time. That's the top number, that's right. Yeah. So I think here's what's happening. When you do that on your calculator like that, if you don't put all the parentheses on the bottom, it's dividing it by 2 and then taking that whole answer times that. Be really careful when you're doing this. Your calculator does order of operations. So if you're typing this in your calculator all at once, you have to put the bottom in parentheses, because if not, it will divide by 2 and then multiply by this and then multiply by this, and it will give you not the right answer. Which is why I tend to like to do just the top and the bottom and then just put it in my calculator. Just be careful on that. This is where we have problems in second hour, because we solve for C first using law of sines, and if you do that, you get an acute angle, but obviously C is going to be an obtuse angle, so just don't do law of sines. It's the lesson of the day.
Where they messed up is they asked why.
Right, well, like someone said, let's just do law of sines instead of law of cosines, and I said, yeah, that'll work. And then we did law of sines, and then we got 2 answers, and someone got 1 answer and someone got the other answer. And then I said, oh, I think law of sines is a bad idea, and then we just got all confused. So I should have just stopped and said, no law of sines, but I didn't. So
Got one for your mistakes.
I know, that's why it's good to have me second time. What else can we do with this? There are 2 area formulas to find the area of an oblique triangle. I'm not making you memorize these. I just want you to know how to use them. And that's the last 2 things of this chapter. So let's write them out and then maybe do an example. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully you know how to find the area of a triangle. It's 1/2 base times height, right? For a right triangle, that's really easy because the base and the height are the legs of the triangle, right? But for an oblique triangle, there is no right angle, which means it's a lot harder to find the area of that. Well, since we know trig, there's a little shortcut for that. And so for an oblique triangle, instead of doing 1/2 base times height, you could do this. Now I'm going to draw pictures and match this. they give you an angle and the sides that are between that angle, so this would be B and this would be C, the area will always be 1/2 times the sine of the angle times the two sides that are in between it. You could do that for any angle, and I wrote this out 3 times. I don't know that you need to write it all out. I think it's better to write up the definition. But what if they gave you angle B? If they gave you angle B, which two sides would you have to multiply together? And if they gave you angle C, A and B. So I wrote that out, but I think it's better to write out this instead of writing out all 3. To find the area of a triangle, you can take 1/2 of the product of two sides times the sine of their included angle, or you can try something. I give you this formula, but I can tell you that every year there are people that just work this out and get the same answer, because all this is they're doing the trig for you. If they didn't give you this information, how could you do this? You don't have to write all this down, but you need the height, which means you'd have to draw this down and you'd have to make this your height. And guess what happens? You can do some trig here, and you can say that sine of A equals H over C, and you can work it out, and guess what? It works out to give you these formulas depending on how you label this and what angle they give you. I can tell you every year on the test, there are people that don't pay attention that this formula is on the formula sheet, and you can just plug it in, and they draw the picture, and they do SOHCAHTOA, and they get the same answer. This is supposed to just be like a shortcut if you know this formula. All right? But that's where it comes from. It's just trig. So if I asked you to find the area of this triangle, it's just, you can sketch it out, or you can say, oh, B is between A and C. I know I don't even need to draw a picture. I can just take 1/2 times A times C times the sine of B, and you're going to get the area. So it's kind of a shortcut. One time on math team, that was the question. They only give you 30 seconds to do problems on math team, which means you don't have enough time to draw on your height and do the trig and do all that. It was, do you know this formula? So it's just one of those things, like if you know it, you can do the area very quickly. A, B, C, as you can say, this is 120, and then A would be 32, and C would be 50. So you can say that the area is 1/2 times 32 times 50 times the sine of 120. It could be really fancy on this one because 120 is in our unit circle, or you can just type it exactly here and get a decimal. And that is area. It would be square units. They don't tell us what the units are, so you don't really have to put square units on it. But you know, if it was in inches, it would be square inches. One other formula that you can use for area, and you'd be like, why do I need 2 formulas? Well, on this one, they have to give you one angle. What if they didn't give you any angles? What if they just gave you 3 sides of that triangle? And that's where we can use Heron's formula, and Heron is just the person that came up with this formula. I think it was a girl, maybe, if I remember correctly. Maybe I just think that. But. People think that all the time, but I don't think so. It should be what's the first name is the real bonus question, because I don't know the answer to that. It should be on the end of the test, bonus. Tell me some random fact I gave you this chapter.
Second hour is very long.
Glad we math related. Why do I have so many notes today? A lot of notes today. So if the triangle sides are A, B, and C, this is the formula. Again, you don't have to memorize this formula, so that's nice. But then you look at this and you say, where does S come from? This is S. S is if you add all 3 sides together and you divide by 2. That's where S comes from. That's called the semi-perimeter. Basically, it's half the perimeter of that triangle. That's another random fact that probably you don't need to know. Again, could you find the area of a triangle with free side not using this formula, yes, you'd have to draw on the height, you'd have to do some trig, you'd have to know an angle somewhere, or be able to, maybe draw in the midpoint or something, I don't know, and cut it in half. But this is just a formula where you plug in. So if I gave you 3 sides of a triangle, it's just plugging it in, and since I don't make you memorize it, hopefully you could do this problem. You want to find S first. So on this one, I would do 31 plus 52 plus 28, all divided by 2. And I think I got 55 and a half as my number there. And then it's just plugging that in. The square root of 55 times 55 minus 31 times 55 minus 52 times 55 minus 28. And it's kind of cool that that gives you the area of that triangle. Maybe I'm the only one that thinks it's cool, but I think it's cool. 55.5 times the square root of 55.5 minus 31 times 55.5 minus 52 times 55.5 minus 28. And honestly, you can type that in on your calculator at one time and you get an answer. It's just making sure that you use the formula correctly, you don't make any silly mistakes, and you can get the answer from there. That's supposed to be 55.5 all the way through. It's just a little crazy. It looks like 5.55. I got 361.8. So part of your homework is just finding area stuff. We'll definitely go over questions tomorrow, and then we'll have a worksheet tomorrow, and then we'll review on Wednesday, hopefully, test Thursday and Friday. And then we can start chapter 6. Hooray! Definitely 2. Maybe more, but definitely 2. So chapter 5, chapter 6. Okay, so I gave you the assignment sheet. Oh yeah, we're skipping this. No time. 6, 9, 11, 18, 19, 21, 2, 30, 1, 2, 3, 36, 41, 48. This is the last homework assignment besides the review. If you're behind on homework, you might want to start working on that. A lot of homework problems for this chapter. Yeah. Also, someone in second board erased it from me, and they didn't get it back. That's my other complaint about second hour today. I don't even remember it for that part. I just remember someone doing it after.
This is from Black
Talking about us, the second hour? You're talking about us, the second hour?
right here. Yeah, this is like
We have the winners of the med tech drawing at lunchtime. These are the winners. We need these